Alright, what is up you guys, and welcome back to the Progressive Skills in English Level 2 coursebook. Just before I start with the second theme of this book, I wanted to quickly recap what we took in Theme 1. So if you guys remember, we talked about culture and civilization in Theme 1. And we talked about, coming of age and how different countries and different cultures celebrate people becoming of adult age differently. We also talked about the different festivals and celebrations around the world. We also talked about the fireworks, some horse races, particularly the one in Italy, right? And different bull races, particularly the one in Indonesia. Okay? So now in today's recording, we're going to be going to Theme 2, Technology. And we're going to talk about who, what, and when. These different questions about different topics are going to be answered throughout this topic, right? We're also going to talk specifically about transport inventions, right? When was the ship first introduced? When was the plane introduced, right? We'll also talk a little bit about space travel. I know that's something that a lot of people seem to not know too much about, right? And I think it's a revolutionary discovery. The fact that we know that we live in a planet or on a planet in space is incredible. So we'll talk a little bit about space travel. And finally, we're going to talk about the historic moment, right? So let's go to listening. We'll start with who, what, and when. So here we have real-time listening, transport inventions. So let's start with exercise A. We have activating ideas. So look at the forms of transport on the opposite page and number the inventions in order, and also give your opinion on which of these inventions is the greatest in the history of transport. Okay, so let's take a look at the different forms of transport. So here you can see the oldest pieces of equipment when it comes to transport. So here you have a steamship, here you have a very old bicycle, a very old helicopter, the very first mechanical car, right? You also have the steam train, you have the very first plane, and you have a boat, right? The very first boat. So when it comes to, which one was the earliest, I'll get back to that, but I definitely say that it started with the boat, right? People used, the power of the wind to get from place to place on sea, obviously, for a lot of years before, steam was first introduced here on ships. Okay, and I'll get back more. I'll explain it with more detail as we go. So now, discussing groups, which of these inventions is the greatest in the history of transport? So, in your opinion, as a student, what do you think of all of these is the greatest invention when it comes to the history of transport? And for me personally, I'd definitely say the plane. Just because, have you seen how easy it is to get around the world now? Like, you can literally go across the world in less than 24 hours, which is insane. People used to take months upon months to get to, not even far away, right, from one place to the other. But now, with the help of planes, you could go from the Middle East to the United States to the United Kingdom to Australia. It really doesn't matter. You can go online, book a plane ticket, and go. So that's, in my opinion, the greatest transport invention of all time. All right? Now let's go to exercise B, understanding the organization of a lecture. Let me actually open this so you guys can get a better view. Here we have, you're going to listen to a lecture on the history of transport. Okay, so we're going to be listening to the introduction of a lecture on the history of transport, okay? And I want you guys to keep in mind, what is the lecturer going to talk about exactly? So write some points down as you go along. Here you go, have a listen.
Track 2.1.
I'm going to talk to you today about inventions. That is, new ways of doing something. All the inventions are in the field or area of transport. First, I'm going to talk about different methods or types of transport. After that, I'll tell you when each method was invented. Finally, I'm going to say which invention was the most important as far as I'm concerned. I mean, in my opinion.
Alright, so based on the audio that we just heard, we know that the lecturer is going to talk about inventions and transport inventions to be specific. And it's divided into 3 parts. So she's going to talk first about the different methods of transport, right? And then she's going to talk about when each method was invented. And finally, she'll say the most important method, as far as she's concerned, or in her personal opinion. Alright? So that was B. Now let's go to C, making notes. Let me open this. So you'll notice that now we're going to listen to the second part of the lecture, right? I want you guys to keep in mind the names because we're going to be copying these under the correct picture. And keep in mind that there are some pictures here that don't have any information, right, from the lecture. So keep that in mind. But also, I'd say keep like a notepad, sticky note, or pen and paper with you just so you can write the names down. Alright, so here you go. Have a listen.
Track 2.2.
Okay, so first, what are the main methods of transport that we use today? We can, of course, travel on land, on sea, and in the air. We use cars and bicycles, trains, small boats, and big ships, and of course, planes. Okay, so there are several methods of transport, but when was each method invented? The first method of transport was, of course, walking. But about 40,000 years ago, yes, that's right, 40,000, some Indonesian natives made a boat and sailed from one island to another. For centuries, man sailed the seas using only the power of the wind. Then, in 1775, J.C. Perrier, that's P-E-R-I-E-R, invented the steamship. Steam also powered the first train. In 1830, James Stephenson drove his engine called the Rocket along a track, and the railway age began. Just 9 years later, in 1839, a man called Macmillan invented the bicycle. 50 years after that, in 1888, Carl Benz, that's B-E-N-Z, invented the motor car. So now, man could move quickly on land and on the sea. Finally, at the beginning of the 20th century, the Wright brothers conquered the air. That's Wright with a silent W. On December the 17th in 1903, they flew their plane called Flyer a distance of 1,000 kilometers and went down in history.
Alright, so that was the body of the lecture, or rather the second part of the lecture. Now let's take a look, or actually before we do that, let me ask you guys some comprehension questions. Just, so you can get a brief idea of what we're talking about. So if I say, what was the first method of transport? I know your mind quickly goes to the pictures here, and will probably say the boat, but is that really the first method of transport? No, it's not. The first method of transport is simply walking. And we actually use this method to this day, right? You walk. Some people walk from home to school. I mean, obviously it's not reliable anymore, but walking is still a very good method of transport, right? And when was the boat invented, you guys? That's correct. It was invented 40,000 years ago. I mean, it doesn't... What do you guys think? That's a really long time. I mean, 40,000 years ago, before the boat, people had nothing. Just walking and basically a little bit of swimming, and that was it. Alright, so now let me ask you one more question. What kind of power followed wind power? So we know that humans used the power of the wind to power, obviously, to move around through boats on water. But what kind of power were humans able to use after the wind? That's correct. They used steam, right? You guys We talked about steamships and steam trains. Remember when you see in the movies that boop boop sound? Okay. Now, when did the railway age begin? You guys know the railway age is the age when trains became really popular. And it was around 1830, right? And what did Macmillan invent exactly? Macmillan invented the bicycle, right? And when exactly did Benz invent the motor car? Here you can see the very first motor car, right? It was around 1888, right? And how far did the first plane fly? So the planes that you see all over the world that, go, I'm talking thousands upon thousands of kilometers. How far did the first plane fly compared to them? It was only 1,000 kilometers, and that went down in history, right? And who invented the plane? It was the Wright brothers, right? Wright with a silent W. Okay, so these were just some comprehension questions so you guys can get a better idea about transport inventions. Now let's go to some of the pictures here. So here we have picture A, and who exactly invented, or when was it invented? We'll say it was around 1775, right? And it was called Perrier. Yeah. So Perrier. Okay? So 1775 Perrier. Then we have B, the bicycle, and we just said this. It was Macmillan who invented the bicycle. So it was around 1839 based on the notes that I took, and his name was Macmillan. Okay, so 1839 Macmillan. And here we have C, we have a rocket, but I'm not too sure that the lecturer talked about a rocket, so we'll just say no information, right? Because I don't know anything about the first rocket. And here we have the very first prototype helicopter. Again, I don't hear anything about a helicopter, so I'll say no information. Okay? Then we have E, the very first steam train. And I think it was around 1830, right? It was called the Rocket, and it was by Stephenson. So we'll say Stephenson, and it was called, we'll say the Rocket. Okay, so 1830, Stephenson, the Rocket. Okay, and here we have the very first motor car, right? So not mechanical, the motor car. It was around, yeah, we just said this, 1888, and he was called Benz, right? So 1888, Benz. Then we have G, obviously the big one, the plane, how we as humans conquered the sky, right? 1903, and it was by the Wright brothers. I mean, thank God for the Wright brothers, man. I mean, honestly, the Wright brothers, and it was called the Flyer. Yeah, so the very first plane was called the Flyer. And finally, we have picture H. This is obviously a boat, so this was around 40,000 years ago, right? 40,000 years ago. And we'll just write years ago, right? And we'll say Indonesian natives were the people that first started using the boat. So Indonesian natives. Okay? So that was exercise C, making notes. Now let's move on. Actually, before we do that, let me read this vocab box. You guys know what to do. We always write them down and check our pronunciation, and then we move on. So we have conquer, drive, drove, field, fly / flew, invent, invention, island, power, sea, train, transport, travel, and walking. Okay? So that was the vocab box. Now let's go to exercise D, understanding an opinion. And what does it exactly mean to understand an opinion? So we're going to listen to the final part of the lecture, and you're going to have to answer this question. Which invention does the lecturer think is the most important invention, and why does she have this opinion? All right, so have a listen and listen carefully. Here you go.
Track 2.3.
So, we have heard about the main inventions in the field of transport. But which invention was the most important? In my opinion, it was the last invention, the plane. This invention has made the world into a much smaller place. People can travel right to the other side of the world in a day. Why is that important? Because the more we travel, the more we understand other people and other cultures.
All right, so based on the final part, we know that the lecturer thinks that the most important invention is the plane. And why does she have this opinion exactly? And notice why I said opinion, because it's something that's up to her. You might not necessarily agree with her, but you have to respect an opinion. So why does she have this opinion? She has this opinion because she thinks that the planes has made the world a much smaller place. It allows us to connect together as human beings and understand the different cultures and basically open our minds up to new possibilities all over the world, right? And honestly, I respect that and I agree with her. I really do believe that the most important invention is the plane. Now, some people might say that the rocket, for example, is the greatest invention. Why? Because it allows us to explore space, right? The different satellites and rockets, all of these equipment allow us to explore space. Some people might argue with me, but it's all a matter of opinion. It's not about who's right and who's wrong. You might have a different opinion, but you gotta have that sense of respect to others and their different opinions or points of view. All right? Because everybody is different. All right? So that was understanding an opinion, you guys. Now let's move to the next page. All right, you guys. So now moving on to 2.2, learning new listening skills. And in today's lesson, or in this lesson, you guys will be able to recognize the organization of a lecture and the change of subtopics, right? You'll be hearing dates, years, and different time periods, and you'll also be understanding the difference between going to and will. Okay, so let's start with reviewing vocabulary. We're going to be listening to some sentences and take the best way to complete each sentence. So for example, inventions or inventing, traveling or transport, you get the idea. This is really simple. I'll be ticking as we go along. All right, so here, have a listen.
Track 2.4.
1. I'm going to talk to you today about 2. All the inventions are in the field of 3. We can, of course, travel on 4. When was each method? 5. Sailing boats use the power of the 6. In 1830, James Stephenson drove his engine, called the rocket, along a 7. In 1903, the Wright brothers conquered the 8. The plane was the most important invention in my 9. The plane has made the world a much smaller 10. The more we travel, the more we understand other people and other.
Alright, so these were some of the best ways to complete each sentence. Now let's move on to exercise B, hearing short vowel sounds. Now let me talk a little bit before we start this exercise. what do I mean by vowel sounds? I mean that words that make similar vowel sounds. They might not even have the same vowel, but what I care about is the sound itself, right? Let me elaborate, you guys will get the idea once we start the exercise. So look at the words below. They are all from the lecture in lesson 2.1, and they all have short vowel sounds. So place each word in the correct column according to the underlined vowel, and then we'll listen and check our answers once we're done. So here we have I, A-E, E, that sound, or that A sound, rather. Okay, so we have different sounds. Again, sound and not the vowel itself. So there might be an I here, not an A, but if it makes the same sound, then it belongs there. Okay, so let's start with I. So we have ship. What are words that have the same I sound? Ship, hiss, as in history, right? It might not rhyme, by the way, but as long as that I has the same sound, that's all that matters. So ship, shit, hiss, history, okay? So that same I sound. Then we have which. So shit, ship, hit, history, wit, which, okay? So wit, which. And then we have, what do we have? We have wind, wind as well. We have wind, so w again, I, that I sound, okay? Now let's go to AE, as in land. Land, land, that, land, that. It has that same AE sound to it, so land, that, track, trans. So track, let's go with track first. Then we have trans, as in transport, so trans, again, that same AE sound. Alright? Now let's go to E, we have tell. N, as in engine, right? N, engine, tell, N, engine. And we have when, again, right? So tell, when, N, as in engine. Then we have, we'll say went, again, went. Then we have jet. Then we have pet, as in petrol. Okay, so N, engine, when, went, jet, and pet, roll, and tell. Alright, and finally that A sound, on, we can say because, on, because, cause, on, cause. Okay, then we have was. We can also say rock, on, rock, so rock as in rocket, and what. Okay, so these are some of the short vowel sounds. Okay, now exercise C is similar but with long vowel sounds. So instead of the short vowel sounds that we're used to, now we're going to hear long vowel sounds. So look at the words below. They're all from the lecture in lesson 2.1, and they all have long vowel sounds. So place each word in the correct column according to the underlined vowel, and listen and check your answers. I'll check both answers for exercise B and C after we're done. Okay? So we have source called move. Okay. Let's start with that I sound. That's an E. So C. I'll say each, right? C, each, peep, as in people. I can also say steam, right? So C, each, people, and steam, right? And then we have car, as in R. So car, after, or after, it depends on how you pronounce it. It's correct. Far, okay, so car, far. And last or lost, depending on how you pronounce it. Alright? And then we have first, that R sound. So first, or not, you get the idea. First, I'll say, I can say concerned, right? So first, concerned, that E sound. First, concerned. And I'll have world. That also works, right? Now let's go to horse. Horse. Called. I think that works. Yeah. Horse. Called. Source. I know my pronunciation can be a little bit weird at times, so that's why I'll listen and check the answers after I'm done. So we have horse, called, source, more, right? More. Transport. That one also works. And we have course. That one also works. And we have that U sound. It's not necessary, by the way, to even have the vowels themselves. So it has that U sounds, but what if it doesn't even have a U? That's totally fine, okay? So new. New does not have a U, but it has that sound, and that's, again, all that matters. So new, flew, move, and use. Okay? So now let's check the answers for C, and we'll go back to checking the answers for exercise B. Here we go.
Track 2.6.
After. Called. Concerned. Course. Each. Far. Flew. Last. More. Move. People. Source. Steam. Transport. Use. World.
Alright, so you can see with the different pronunciation that it works. It's just that my pronunciation is different from the speaker. Okay? Now let's go back to B just for a second to check our answers or check the pronunciation, and then we'll move on. Here you go.
Track 2.5.
Because. Engine. History. Jet. Petrol. Rocket. That. Track. Transport. Was. Went. What. When. Which. Wind.
Alright, and now let's move on. Actually, before we do, let's just quickly go over the vocab box. You guys know the drill. So we have air, land, opinion, rocket, sky, steam, track, and wind. Okay, now let's move on. So here we have identifying a new skill. So let's hop to skills check 1 so we get a better idea of what this skill is. And the skill is recognizing the organization of a lecture. So the introduction to a lecture often gives you the order of subtopics, right? So when a lecturer is giving the introduction, he'll give you the order of what he's going to say in subtopics, right? So you're hearing phrases such as, first I'm going to talk about, that's usually the first topic, and after that I'll tell you, that's the second topic, and when you hear finally, you know that that's going to be the final, or in this case the third topic. Okay, so now let me open exercise D here. We have listen again to the first part of the lecture in lesson 2.1. You guys remember lesson 2.1 about transport inventions, and what is the lecturer doing in this part? So here, have a listen and let me know.
Track 2.1.
I'm going to talk to you today about inventions. That is, new ways of doing something. All the inventions are in the field or area of transport. First, I'm going to talk about different methods or types of transport. After that, I'll tell you when each method was invented. Finally, I'm going to say which invention was the most important as far as I'm concerned. I mean, in my opinion.
Alright, so based on the audio that we just heard, we know that the lecturer is giving an introduction, right, to a lecture, and she's also giving us the order of subtopics that she's going to be talking about, right, by using phrases to help us indicate the order of subtopics, the lecturers usually use phrases, like I said, like first I'm going to talk about, after that I'll tell you, and finally I'm going to say. Okay? So now let's listen to or actually one more thing before we move on. I wanted to just point out to you guys that in an actual lecture, you could leave a lot of space in each section for writing detailed notes, okay? So instead of leaving 1 or 2 lines to write some notes, leave more if you want a more detailed note, okay? For each subtopic, that is. Alright? So now let's go to listen to the introductions to some more lectures and organize your notes. Okay, so what we're going to do is I want you guys to take some notes to these different introductions to more lectures, and we'll compare after we're done. Okay, so here, have a listen.
Track 2.7.
Introduction 1.
I'm going to talk to you today about festivals. First, I'm going to explain the origins of festivals in general. How does a particular festival start? After that, I'll tell you about some of the most important festivals in the world. Finally, I'm going to say which festivals are good tourist attractions as far as I'm concerned. I mean, in my opinion.
Introduction 2.
The topic of today's lecture is Turkey. I'll begin by giving you some basic facts about the country, size, population, etc. Then I'll describe the main natural features of the country. After that, I'll tell you a few things about the modern history of Turkey. Finally, I'll give you some ideas about the future for Turkey.
Introduction 3.
Today we're going to talk about the weather. Firstly, I'll mention briefly the main weather conditions. Then I'll explain how each weather condition comes about, what causes rain, for example, or snow. Next, I'll say a few words about damage, which can be caused by weather, floods, landslides, hurricanes. Finally, the big topic, climate change. What is happening to our weather?
Alright, so based on these introductions, I wrote some notes. So let's go over introduction 1, festivals. So for me, I wrote that 1, origins, and 2, most important, and 3, best tourist attractions. Okay, just like here. And then for introduction 2, Turkey, I wrote 1, basic facts, 2, the natural features of the country, 3, modern history, and 4, the future. What did you write? And introduction 3, for the weather, I wrote 1, main conditions, 2, how come about and causes, okay, and 3, damage, and 4, the big one, climate change. Okay? Let me know in the comments below, what did you write in terms of notes for these introductions to lectures. Alright? So now let's move on. Here we have exercise E, identifying a new skill 2. So let's go to skills check 2, recognizing change of subtopics. So in skills check 1, we were recognizing the organization of a lecture, but in skills check 2 now, we're recognizing the change of a subtopic. Now, lecturers often indicate change of subtopic very clearly. So first, what are the main methods of transport? That's a subtopic. So there are several methods of transport, but when you hear but when, that's obviously going to be a change in subtopic. So we have heard about the main inventions in the field of transport, but which invention, that's also going to be a change in subtopic, and in my opinion, and go on, that's also a change in subtopic. Now let me open exercise E. Here we have we're going to listen to the extracts and what is the lecturer doing in each extract. So let's listen and talk a little bit about this.
Track 2.8.
Extract 1.
So, first, what are the main methods of transport?
Extract 2.
So, there are several methods of transport, but when?
Extract 3.
So we've heard about the main inventions in the field of transport, but which invention?
Extract 4.
In my opinion,
Okay, so based on these 4 extracts, they're the exact same as the ones in Skills Check 2. They just help you understand or recognize the change of a subtopic, okay? That was all that is. So now let's go to 2. Listen to some extracts from the lectures in exercise D. So I think we have about around 5, right? And what are we going to do here? How does the lecturer signal the change of topic in each case? Okay, so in each case, we're going to hear these phrases in the different extracts. Obviously, they're not going to be numbered correctly, so we'll have to number the phrases as we go. Okay, so please recognize the change of subtopic, and we'll number the phrases as we go along. Here we go.
Track 2.9.
Finally, I'm going to say which festivals are good tourist attractions, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, in my opinion. So first, how does a festival start?
The most destructive weather condition is the hurricane in general, although of course tsunamis sometimes kill huge numbers of people. So we have heard about natural disasters. Now, climate change.
Perhaps the most important recent event is the application by Turkey to join the EU. The other countries are still considering the application. So we have seen some important events in recent history. But what does the future hold for the country?
So all festivals begin with an event, and modern rituals often remember something about that event. Right, that's origins. What about today? What are the most important festivals in the modern world?
As you can see, Turkey is a big country in terms of population and quite big in terms of area. Okay, now let's look at the main natural features, mountains, lakes and so on.
Alright, so these were the phrases in the correct order that we heard them in from the extracts. Okay, so I think that was exercise E. Now let's move to the next page. Alright you guys, so now moving on to the next page. Here we have exercise F, hearing blends. So read the pronunciation check. What are the missing letters? S, H, or CH? Listen and check your ideas. So let's take a look at the pronunciation check here. So we have the letters CH make the sound, that ch sound, right? So change, match, which, each. You can see that TCH sound at the end, so ch, okay? Then we have the letters SH make the sound sh. So ship, I don't say chip, I say ship. Fresh, short, English, right? If I say chip, that's something else, but ship is pronounced like this, ship, okay? No T. So the difference between CH and SH is that T that we pronounced before that sh sound, okay? So match, which, each, and change versus ship, fresh, short, and English, okay? Then we have the final letters T-I-O-N often have the sound shun, okay? So next time you see a T-I-O-N together, you don't say tion, for example. I don't say invention, I say invention, okay? So it's pronounced as shun. And the stress is always on the vowel before the T-I-O-N. So invention, celebration, congratulation, or congratulations, okay? Alright you guys, and we have the final letters, T-U-R-E, often have the sound chur. They have chur. I don't say ture. That's wrong. I don't say lecture or picture. That's wrong. I say picture, lecture. Okay, it has that chur sound. Okay, so now I hope you got a good idea of what this pronunciation check is about. So again, one more time. CH, it has that ch sound, so T and then sh. SH has only that sh sound, so ship, fresh, short, English. Okay, the final letters T-I-O-N have the shun sound, and the stress is always on the vowel before T-I-O-N. So for example, invention, celebration, differentiation, congratulations. Okay, and we have the final letters T-U-R-E have the sound sure. They don't have, I don't say ture, I say like chur, chur. Okay? Simple enough. Now let's go to exercise F. Let me open this. Okay, so now what are the missing letters SH or CH? So let's take a look at number 1. Fre, F-R-E, and we'll say SH, right? And we have the word fresh, okay? Then we have 2, the word each, okay? T and C-H, right? That pronunciation, so each. Then we have 3, relationship, okay? So, IP is already written, so I'll just write SH. So relationship. And then we have 4, match, M-A-T-C-H. Then we have 5, shuttle, S-H-U-T-T-L-E, so shuttle. Then we have 6, much. This one's obvious, so C-H, much. Then we have 7, research, okay? Research, C-H, okay? Research. Then we have 8, change, okay? So change. Then we have 9, which. This one's question word. And finally we have 10. This one's check, C-H, okay? So fresh, each, relationship, match, shuttle, much, research, change, which, and check, okay? Now let's move on to exercise G, understanding years and dates. So let's take a look at skills check 3. Here we have, hearing dates, years, and time periods. Okay, so we say dates with ordinal numbers. So first, second, third, fourth, etc. You get the idea. So for example, 1 January, I can say on the 1st of January, or on January 1st, right? Both are correct, and that is how I usually say dates. So for example, we have 34, that is on the 30th of April, right? That is also a way to write dates. So we usually say years with 2 cardinal numbers. So 1, 2, 3, 4, you get the idea. So for example, 1815, I can write it like this, in 1815, in 1921. But notice this now. If you have it like this, you'll notice even when I say it around, I'll say in 1900, okay? In 1900, in 1901, people usually don't pronounce the 0 as a 0, but rather as an O, okay? So in some people say in 1901, most people don't. It's 1901, okay? So in 1901, right? Then you obviously, you have 2000, so in 2000. Now let's move on to time periods. So when talking about time periods, we use later, earlier, and ago, right? So for example, in 1964, right, a way to write the date, she arrived in the USA. 9 years later, okay, so 9 years later, it means we're now in 1973, okay? So 9 years later, after that. In 1964, he got married 6 years earlier. So now I'm talking about 1958, okay? So 6 years earlier, all right? And then if I say it's 2015 now, 10 years ago, and I'll complete my sentence, then probably means it was 2005 by then. So 10 years ago, behind us, all right? So that is how we hear dates, years, and time periods. Now let's go and open exercise G. We have listen and write the year. Okay, so we're going to be listening to the years, you guys. So take a look and let's write them down together as we go. Here we go.
Track 2.11. A.
In 1762.
B.
Around 1543.
C.
In 2004.
D.
Around 1691.
E.
In 1938.
F.
In 2010.
G.
In 1033.
H.
In 1914.
I.
In 1940.
J.
In 1802.
Alright, so that was the audio. So in 1762, around 1543, in 2004 or 2004, both are correct, around 1691, in 1938, in 2010, right, or 2010, both are correct, in 1033, right, in 1914, in 1940, and in 1802, okay? Now let's listen to the second audio and write down the date, okay? So here we go.
Track 2.12. A.
On the 1st of February.
B.
On the 10th of December.
C.
On May 16th.
D.
On November the 9th.
E.
On October the 31st.
F.
On the 7th of September.
G.
On the 19th of August.
H.
On June 11th.
I.
On July the 2nd.
J.
On January the 13th.
Alright, so that was the audio, and I'm pretty sure you noticed I couldn't keep up, so I actually wrote them down with my hand. And now we'll go back to it. So A on the 1st of February, right? And that is in capital, always remember. On the 10th of December, again, the capital. On the 10th of December, the 10th. And on May, M capital. 16th, okay? You see now the difference in writing, the date. So on May 16th. Then we have D on November the 9th. So N capital again. I'll say on November the 9th, okay? And for E, I'll say on October the 31st. So I'll say on October on October the 31st. Actually, I don't. October. There's an extra O here, so on October the 31st. Then we have F on the 7th of September. So on the 7th of September. Okay? On the 7th of September. And for G, on the 19th of August. So on, I don't know why I have all of these in small except for one. Write that in small. So on the 7th of September. Then we'll say on the 19th of August, right? And for H, we'll say on June 11th. So on June 11th, right? And I, we'll say on July the 2nd. So on July the 2nd, Okay, on July the 2nd, and J will say on January the 13th. Okay, so on the 1st of February, on the 10th of December, on May 16th, on November the 9th, on October the 31st, on the 7th of September, on the 19th of August, on June 11th, okay, on July the 2nd, and on January the 13th, okay? Now let's move on to the third or fourth and final recording. Listen and complete table 1 below. Okay, so let's have a listen. We'll probably listen to this twice, so listen once and write them down if you can. I'll write them down by hand, and then we'll listen to them again, and I'll be solving them as we go. Here you go, have a listen.
Track 2.13.
The first carts with wheels appeared around 3500 BCE. Around 2000 BCE, horses were used for the first time for transportation. The first horse-drawn bus appeared in 1662. More than 100 years later, in 1769, the first steam-powered car was built. 14 years later, the Montgolfier brothers took off in the first hot air balloon. In 1862, the first petrol engine car appeared. Before that, cars used steam. 5 years later, the first motorcycle was built. The first powered flight took place on the 17th of December 1903. Planes developed very quickly, and on the 14th of October 1947, a jet plane flew faster than the speed of sound. But perhaps the greatest advance in the history of transport was the landing on the moon. On the 21st of July 1969, the first man stepped from his spacecraft onto the surface of another object in our solar system.
Alright, so now let's listen to it one more time, and I'll be solving it as we go.
Track 2.
Around 3 wheels. The first carts with wheels appeared around 3500 BCE. Around 2000 BCE, horses were used for the first time for transportation. The first horse-drawn bus appeared in 1662. More than 100 years later, in 1769, the first steam-powered car was built. 14 years later, the Montgolfier brothers took off in the first hot air balloon. In 1862, the first petrol engine car appeared. Before that, cars used steam. 5 years later, the first motorcycle was built. The first powered flight took place on the 17th of December 1903. Planes developed very quickly, and on the 14th of October 1947, a jet plane flew faster than the speed of sound. But perhaps the greatest advance in the history of transport was the landing on the moon. On the 21st of July 1969, the first man stepped from his spacecraft onto the surface of another object in our solar system.
Alright, you guys, so that was writing the different dates. Okay? So I think that was simple enough. Now let's move on. Do we have anything here? No, we don't. So now let's go to exercise H, writing about plans. So let's go to skills check 4 first, and we have understanding, going to, and will. So lecturers use going to and will to talk about the organization of a talk. So for example, you'll hear a lecturer say, first I'm going to talk about, then I'll describe, right? That's how lecturers use going to and will. But in normal conversation, we use going to talk about future plans, right? Your future plans. You use going to, right? And we use will to talk about future possibilities. So not plans, but possibilities, right? So I'm going to work for the government after university. That's a plan. Perhaps I'll work at the Ministry of Finance. So perhaps means that it's a possibility, more like a 50-50, right? I'm not quite sure if I'll work at the Ministry of Finance or not, okay? So here we have, write sentences about your future plans. Emphasis on plans. So when he said plans, I knew that I was going to have to use going to. Alright, so let's go with number 1. This evening, I can write a simple, I'm going to see my friends this evening. Oh, and by the way, all of these sentences are going to be up to you. So write whatever you want as long as it makes sense and you use going to. Okay? So then we have 2, the weekend. So I can say, I'm going to complete my assignment this weekend, right? It's a plan, and I used going to, right? And then we have 3, in the summer holidays. I can say, I'm going to the Bahamas in the summer holidays, right? That's also a plan. Then we have 4, next year. What can I say for 4? I can say, I'm going to start business courses next year. Okay? And then we have 5, after finishing your studies. This one's interesting. I can say, after finishing my studies, comma, I'm going to travel the world. Okay? Used a different style here. And finally, we have number 6, at lunchtime. And this one's simple. I can say, I'm going to take a nap at lunchtime. Okay? So that was simple enough. Exercise H. Now let's move on to exercise I, using yes or no questions. So here we have, you're talking to your friend, complete the yes or no question in each case. So we have cinema this evening. So we can say, are you going to the cinema this evening? And question mark, right? So are you going to the cinema this evening? A yes or no question. Then we have 2, job and summer holidays. I can say, are you going to get a job in the summer holidays, right? And question mark. So are you going to get a job in the summer holidays? Then we have 3, holiday this year, question mark. So we can say, are you going to go on holiday this year? And question mark. Okay? Are you going to go on holiday this year? Then we have number 4, work at the weekend. For that, I'll say, are you going to work at the weekend? Question mark. So are you going to work at the weekend? And then we have 5, Joe's party next week. So I can say, are you going to go to Joe's party next week? Question mark. Let me put that in capital J, you guys. It's a name. So are you going to go to Joe's party next week? And then we have 6, next car next month. So I'll say, are you going to buy a new car next month? Okay, and question mark. So let's go over them again. Are you going to the cinema this evening? Are you going to get a job in the summer holidays? Are you going to go on holiday this year? Are you going to work at the weekend? Are you going to go to Joe's party next week? Are you going to buy a new car next month? Okay? Now let's move on. Here we have using WH questions. Okay, so now we're going to shift our focus from yes or no questions to WH questions. So let's say, for example, your friend said yes to each question in the previous exercise. Now we're going to write a WH question with the verb given. So we have see, do, all of these are verbs. So for see, we can we'll probably say, what are you going to see? Question mark. And for to, we have do. I'll say, what are you going to do? Question mark. Then we have 3, go. Where are you going to go? Question mark. And then we have 4, study. What are you going to study? Question mark. Okay, and we have 5. Where? What are you going to wear? And here, wear means obviously clothing and not a place. Okay, and 6. Pay. We'll say, what are you going to pay? Okay, so what are you going to pay? Okay, and let me add question mark here and question mark here. Okay, so let's go over them again one more time. Where are you going to see? What are you going to do? Where are you going to go? What are you going to study? What are you going to wear? Where are you going to pay? And that's it. Okay, I think that's the final exercise. Yes, that's it. So this was the listening. I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace out.